In this video, we're going deep into some of the most obscure, overlooked, and genuinely fascinating pieces of Steven Universe lore. The kind of stuff that even people who watch the entire show front to back might have completely missed. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's start with something that almost nobody knows about. There was supposed to be an episode explaining how the diamonds were created. It was planned for season 5, fully conceptualized, and then it got cut. The season's production order was reduced, and that episode never made it to air. Rebecca Sugar, the show's creator, confirmed this in the official Steven Universe End of an Era art book, which was published in 2020. And what she said about it is genuinely fascinating. She explained that the origin of the diamonds is semi-mythical, and that it's now part of what she called gem religion. That means even the version they were going to show us wouldn't have been a straightforward explanation. It would have been vague, interpretive, almost spiritual in nature. The gems themselves don't fully understand where the diamonds came from. But here's where it gets really interesting. That same art book contains a detailed story timeline that Sugar developed years before the show ended. She used it as an internal guide for the writer's room. The very beginning of that timeline, the section that would explain everything about the origin of the gem race, is completely redacted, covered in black bars. You can't read any of it. The only visible detail is a timestamp that reads 20,000 years ago, and a small illustration that appears to show the diamond gemstones emerging from the gem homeworld planet. And here's the thing that most people don't realize. The gem homeworld is cracked in half. The planet is literally split into pieces. The show never once explains what caused this. But that illustration in the art book suggests that the diamond's emergence itself may have been what split the planet apart. Think about what that means. The very act of these beings coming into existence was so powerful, so fundamentally disruptive, that it broke their own world in two. And we were never told that story because the episode explaining it got cut for time. What we do know is that White Diamond took charge. She constructed Gem Society from scratch, acting as the leader of all gems from the very beginning. White emphasized the importance of perfection above everything else. She created the caste system, which determined what every single gem was supposed to be from the moment they were made. She banned cross-gem fusions, which is when two different types of gems combine into a new being. And she established severe punishments for any gem who was deemed flawed or who deviated from their assigned purpose. White Diamond hadn't left the gem homeworld in eons before the events of the series. When Steven and the crystal gems travel to homeworld in the episode Legs from Here to Homeworld, Blue Diamond tells Steven that White is difficult to deal with. Yellow Diamond says she'll do the talking, unless they want to be bubbled for the next few millennia. That's not an exaggeration for dramatic effect. Yellow Diamond is genuinely warning them that White might imprison them in magical bubbles for thousands of years, just for saying the wrong thing. That's the level of fear she commands, even among her fellow diamonds. White Diamond's design itself is full of hidden details most viewers never caught. Rebecca Sugar drew inspiration from the illustrations of Nell Brinkley, an early 20th century American artist known for drawing ethereal, luminous women. White's body constantly radiates a bright light, so intense that her gemstone is barely visible. You can only see her features that have black outlines, like her eyes, her nostrils, her mouth, and her eyebrows. Everything else is consumed by this white glow. A drawing by Sugar that was released separately actually revealed the details I had hidden beneath that light, showing what White Diamond really looks like under the brightness. It took a supplementary illustration to see a main character clearly. That's how much thought went into the visual design. Sugar also confirmed in an Ask Me Anything session that White Diamond is personally responsible for the creation of pearls as an entire class of gem. Pearls in Gem Society are servants. They're made to order, customized for their owners, and expected to stand quietly, look pretty, and do whatever they're told. White Diamond didn't just benefit from this system. She invented it. She decided that an entire category of sentient beings would exist solely to serve others. And that detail reframes everything about Pearl, Steven's Pearl, who spent thousands of years as Pink Diamond's personal servant before the rebellion gave her a chance to be something more. The Crewniverse, which is what the production team called themselves, confirmed something else that adds a layer of sadness to all of this. The Diamonds never had time to learn about empathy throughout their entire existence. From the moment they came into being, they were rulers. That was their function. They were always doing their jobs as intergalactic leaders. And nobody ever taught them that other beings had feelings that mattered. It wasn't until Pink Diamond's rebellion, thousands of years later, that they slowly began learning what empathy even was. They were tyrants, but they were also beings who had never been given the tools to be anything else. White Diamond built a perfect system because she genuinely believed perfection was the only thing that mattered, and she enforced that belief across an entire civilization for 20,000 years. The dynamic between the four diamonds is one of the most layered family relationships in animation. They love each other, but they have serious issues and they don't communicate well at all. White Diamond is never around and treats the others dismissively when she is present. When pushed, she's a straight-up abusive parent figure. Yellow Diamond seems unable to understand her fellow diamonds or take their emotional needs seriously. She's desperate for White's attention and approval, and she channels that desperation into being the most efficient, most productive, most military-minded diamond she can be. She processes grief through anger. She processes frustration through control. When Pink Diamond was supposedly shattered, Yellow's response wasn't to cry. It was to get furious and demand that all traces of Pink's existence be erased. She wanted the human zoo shut down. She wanted the Rose Quartzes destroyed. She wanted to move forward by pretending the past never happened. That's not strength. That's someone who's terrified of feeling pain and will destroy anything that makes her feel it. Blue Diamond is the opposite. She drowns in her grief, literally. Her gem ability allows her to project her emotions onto everyone around her. When she's sad, everyone in her presence becomes overwhelmed with sadness. She weeps and entire rooms full of gems collapse under the weight of her sorrow. She keeps Pink Diamond's human zoo running as a memorial, visiting it periodically to mourn. She holds onto every artifact, every memory, every connection to the diamond she lost. Where Yellow tries to erase the pain, Blue tries to preserve it forever. Neither approach is healthy, and neither Diamond ever thought to talk to the other about what they were actually feeling. Pink Diamond was the youngest, the smallest, and the most overlooked. She bugged the other diamonds constantly, begging for a colony of her own so she could prove she was just as capable as they were. When she finally got Earth, she was so excited. And then she actually visited the planet and saw the life growing on it, and everything changed. She saw organic creatures that were born, grew, changed, and died. Gems don't do any of those things. Gems are static. They emerge from the ground fully formed and they stay that way forever. The concept of growth was alien to Pink Diamond, literally alien, and it fascinated her so deeply that she decided the entire colonization of Earth needed to stop. The human zoo is one of the most unsettling locations in the entire show, and it connects directly to the Diamond's relationship with Earth. Pink Diamond had humans collected from Earth and placed in an enclosed habitat on a space station. The zoo is maintained by a group of amethyst guards, the Famethyst, who were originally made on Earth and assigned to guard duty after the colony was abandoned. Inside the zoo, the humans live in a kind of paradise. They're fed on schedule. Their emotional states are managed by devices called choosening, which pair them in romantic relationships decided by the system. They're happy, in the way that someone in a perfectly climate-controlled room with regular meals might be happy. But they have no agency, no choice, no understanding of the world outside their enclosure. Pink Diamond loved humanity so much that she put them in a cage. She was trying to preserve what she found beautiful, but preservation without freedom is just a different kind of prison. And that tension between Pink's genuine love for life and her inability to fully understand what respecting life actually requires runs through her entire story. Yellow Diamond has one particularly chilling moment in the show that reveals how she views Earth and everything on it. In the episode Message Received, the 16th episode of Season 2, Peridot contacts Yellow Diamond directly to report on the cluster's progress. During the conversation, Peridot works up the courage to suggest that Earth has value, that its resources and organic life are worth preserving. Yellow Diamond's response is cold and immediate. She says she wants the planet destroyed. Not colonized, not repurposed, destroyed. Peridot tries to argue. Yellow Diamond shuts her down. The scene is terrifying because Yellow doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. She simply makes it clear that Earth's existence is an inconvenience she wants removed. When Peridot calls her a clod and hangs up, the crystal gems are stunned. Nobody talks to a diamond that way. It's one of the bravest things any character does in the entire series. And it comes from the smallest, most resource-deprived gem on the team. But here's the question that opens up the next chapter of this story. If every gem is made for a purpose, if the entire system is built around the idea that you are what you were created to be and nothing else, then what happens to the ones who don't fit? What happens to the gems who come out wrong, or who discover they want something different from what they were made for? That brings us to one of the most overlooked groups in the entire series, and their story is a lot more heartbreaking than most people realize. The Off-Colors are a group of gems who live in hiding on Homeworld, underground in an abandoned kindergarten, because Gem Society considers them defective. They're outcasts, broken, wrong, and the show treats their stories with a gentleness that makes them hit even harder when you think about what they actually represent. Ian Jones-Quartey, who was an executive producer on the show, specifically wanted to bring the Off-Colors into the story. He said they represent those who don't fit into society, and he really wanted to explore what that means in the context of a civilization that literally manufactures its citizens for specific roles. When your entire identity is supposed to be determined before you even exist, what does it mean to be different? Let's start with Rhodonite, because her backstory has a detail that almost nobody talks about. Rhodonite is a fusion of a ruby and a pearl. Those two gems served a high-ranking gem named Morganite. When Morganite discovered that her ruby and her pearl liked to fuse with each other, she didn't just separate them. She replaced them and outcasted them entirely. They were thrown away because they loved each other. But here's the detail from the end of an era art book that most fans have never heard. Morganite wasn't just some random gem. She was revealed to be the designer of the diamond palanquins, those massive ornate thrones the diamonds are carried around in. Morganite was a high-ranking, important member of Gem Society. She had real power, and she used that power to destroy two gems for the crime of wanting to be together. That's not just prejudice. That's institutional cruelty backed by genuine authority. Then there's Fluorite, who was a fusion of 6 different gems. 6 individual beings who found each other over time and chose to stay fused permanently. She speaks incredibly slowly, and there's a reason for that beyond just being a character quirk. When you're a fusion of 6 separate consciousnesses, coordinating your thoughts and words takes real effort. Every sentence Fluorite speaks has been processed and agreed upon by 6 minds working in harmony. That's not confusion. That's the most deliberate communication you've ever heard. Padparadscha is a sapphire, a type of gem that can see the future. But Padparadscha's ability works differently from other sapphires. She can predict the future, but only after it's already happened. She'll announce that something is about to occur right as it finishes occurring. Erica Luttrell, the voice actress who plays Padparadscha, described this in the official Steven Universe podcast as a wonderful ability. And honestly, when you think about it, she's right. Padparadscha processes reality at her own pace. She's not broken. She experiences time differently. In a society that values precision and perfection, being slightly out of sync with everyone else is treated as a fatal flaw. But all Padparadscha is really doing is seeing the same things everyone else sees, just on her own timeline. The Rudel twins are conjoined. They emerged from the same kindergarten hole at the same time, and their forms merged together. By Homeworld standards, this makes them defective. 1 body, 2 minds, 2 personalities, sharing a single physical form. They finish each other's sentences and operate in constant tandem. On Homeworld, they would have been shattered or imprisoned for existing this way. In the Off-Colors' hidden cave, They're just people trying to survive. All of these gems have been hiding underground, possibly for thousands of years, to avoid being discovered and destroyed by a society that considers their existence a mistake. They live in darkness, in an abandoned kindergarten where gems used to be manufactured, surrounded by the empty holes where other gems emerged and went on to live the lives they were designed for. The off-colors sit in those same tunnels, living proof that the manufacturing process isn't perfect, that sentient beings can't be quality controlled into uniformity. And this connects to something important about Era 2. After the rebellion, after the Diamonds launched their devastating attack on Earth and pulled their forces back to Homeworld, Gem Society entered what's called Era 2. Resources had been depleted, the Empire was strained, and the gems produced during this period came out weaker than their predecessors. Era 2 gems lacked basic abilities like shapeshifting. Peridot is an Era 2 gem, which is why she originally had no innate powers and had to rely entirely on technology. Her limb enhancers and her screen. When she first arrives on Earth, she can barely function without her equipment. She's never known anything else. She was made in a time of scarcity, and her entire being reflects that. The caste system that White Diamond built isn't just about social hierarchy. It's a manufacturing blueprint. Diamonds rule at the top. Sapphires serve as diplomats and future seers. Quartzes are soldiers, big, strong, built for combat. Rubies are expendable foot soldiers, small and interchangeable, often deployed in squads of identical units. Bismuths are builders, responsible for constructing gem structures and forging weapons. And pearls are at the bottom, made to be servants, accessories, status symbols for their owners. Rebecca Sugar confirmed that blue-colored gems tend toward diplomatic roles, which explains why Blue Diamond's court is full of courtly, emotionally sensitive gems, while Yellow Diamond's court is military and industrial. Every gem is made knowing exactly what they're supposed to be. As Rose Quartz once told Greg, when a gem is made, it's for a reason. They burst out of the ground knowing what they're supposed to be, and that's what they are. Forever. That line takes on a completely different meaning when you know Rose was actually Pink Diamond. A being who spent her entire existence trying to be something other than what she was made to be. She understood the system because she was at the top of it. And she hated it because even at the top, the system still told her who she had to be. The off-colors survived by hiding in the spaces the system forgot about. The abandoned kindergartens, the underground tunnels, the cracks in Homeworld's rigid structure. They found each other in the dark and built something that Homeworld said was impossible. A community based on acceptance rather than function. That's not just a nice story for a kid's show. That's a genuinely radical statement about what happens when a society decides that some of its members are disposable. The off-colors eventually escape Homeworld thanks to one of the most unexpected character arcs in the series. Lars Barriga, a human teenager from Beach City who spent most of the show being anxious, insecure, and kind of a jerk, ends up stranded on Homeworld with Steven. When they discover the off-colors hiding underground, Lars is terrified. He's a normal kid, surrounded by alien beings on an alien planet with no way home. But when a threat appears, and the off-colors are in danger, Lars does something nobody, including himself, expected. He sacrifices himself to save them. He dies. Actually dies. And Steven, overwhelmed with grief, cries on Lars's body, and his healing tears bring Lars back to life. But Lars doesn't come back normal. He comes back pink. His skin turns the same shade of pink as Lion. His hair becomes a portal to the same pocket dimension inside Lion's mane. He's been resurrected by Diamond Power, and that power has fundamentally changed him. Lars becomes the captain of a stolen Homeworld ship, leading the off-colors through space as they make their way back to Earth. The kid who couldn't even talk to his crush without panicking becomes a space pirate captain who outmaneuvers Homeworld pursuers and earns the fierce loyalty of a crew of outcasts. His character growth is among the most dramatic in the series, and it happens because he ended up in a situation where the only choice was to become someone braver than he thought he could be. Lars's transformation also carries one of the show's more bittersweet implications. like Lion, Lars is now functionally immortal. He doesn't age. He's been changed at a fundamental level by Pink Diamond's power. His friends will grow old and die. Sadie, the girl he cares about, will live a normal human lifespan. Lars won't. He'll keep going, unchanged, long after everyone he grew up with is gone. The show doesn't dwell on this explicitly, but it's there in the subtext. Pink Diamond's power to resurrect comes with a cost that nobody asks for. There's another piece of lore connected to the off colors that relates to the broader theme of identity in the show, and it centers on Garnet. Garnet is a fusion of ruby and sapphire, two gems who love each other so completely that they choose to exist as one being almost all the time. The show treats fusion as an extended metaphor for relationships, for intimacy, for the way two people can become something greater than either of them alone. And Garnet is the living embodiment of that metaphor. The episode The Answer, which is the 22nd episode of Season 2, tells the story of how Ruby and Sapphire first met. Ruby was a common soldier, one of 3 identical rubies assigned to protect Sapphire during a diplomatic mission for Blue Diamond on Earth. Sapphire was an aristocratic gem with the ability to see the future. She had already foreseen that 2 of her ruby guards would be destroyed in an attack by the crystal gems, and she accepted this calmly because that was the future, and sapphires don't fight fate. But when the attack came, Ruby couldn't accept it. She grabbed Sapphire and shielded her, changing the future that Sapphire had seen. In doing so, they accidentally fused for the first time. The result was Garnet, a being that Homeworld considered an abomination, a fusion of 2 different gem types, an off-color by definition. Blue Diamond was furious. She ordered Ruby to be shattered for the crime of fusing with a member of her court. Ruby and Sapphire fled together, and they've been together ever since. Garnet's entire existence is a rebellion against the caste system. She is living proof that love between different types of beings isn't just possible, it creates something new and beautiful. And she carries that truth with her every second of every day, because she is that truth. She doesn't have a relationship, she is a relationship. When she unfuses, she ceases to exist. Garnet isn't just a character. She's an argument that love matters more than labels. That's why the forced fusions in the kindergarten hit Garnet so hard. That's why she nearly unfused when she saw the cluster gems. Those twisted, suffering creatures are a perversion of everything she represents. Fusion born of love versus fusion born of violence. Garnet chooses to exist. The cluster gems never had a choice. But the kindergartens themselves, those places where the off-colors hide, hold secrets that go much deeper than forgotten tunnels and empty holes. The way gems are actually created is one of the most disturbing things the show ever depicted, and most viewers don't fully process what it means when they first see it. So let's talk about what really happens inside a kindergarten, and why the Earth was almost destroyed by one. Gems are not born, they're manufactured. The process works like this. A massive device called an injector is driven into the crust of a living planet. It injects a mineral solution deep into the rock, and that solution begins growing a gem. But here's the part that makes it horrifying. The gem doesn't just grow from the minerals in the rock. It drains the life force from everything around it. The soil, the plants, the organisms, the entire ecosystem surrounding the injection site gets consumed to fuel the gem's creation. That's why every kindergarten in the show looks the same. They're barren, lifeless canyons with smooth walls pocked by gem-shaped exit holes. Nothing grows there. Nothing can grow there. The land itself has been drained of every biological resource it once held. The episode On the Run, which is the 40th episode of Season 1, is where we first see the prime kindergarten on Earth. Is where Amethyst was made, and the moment she takes Steven there, the tone of the show shifts dramatically. The prime kindergarten is dead. Not just abandoned, but biologically dead. The canyon walls are smooth and pale, carved out by thousands of gem injections over centuries. Each hole in the wall represents a gem that was grown there. fed by the life that used to exist in that spot. Amethyst's origin isn't just that she was made in this place. Her existence literally cost the Earth a piece of itself. Earth had two kindergartens. The Prime Kindergarten, which was the main production facility, and the Beta Kindergarten, which was rushed into operation during the Gem War when Homeworld needed more soldiers quickly. The Beta was sloppy. The Gem exit holes are crooked, uneven, jammed in at wrong angles. Peridot examines the Beta in the episode titled Beta, which is the 22nd episode of Season 3, and she's openly disgusted by how poorly the gems were manufactured there. Most of the gems produced in the Beta came out wrong in some way. Misshapen, undersized, not up to Homeworld standards. But there's one exception. Jasper. Her exit hole is absolutely perfect. Clean, precise, exactly the right shape. Peridot is stunned when she sees it. Jasper emerged from the worst, most chaotic kindergarten on Earth, and she came out flawless, the ultimate quartz. That's part of why Jasper is so fanatically loyal to Homeworld's hierarchy. She's proof that the system works. She's the perfect soldier produced by an imperfect process. And she clings to that identity because without it, she's just another product of a failed colony on a planet that Homeworld abandoned. Amethyst has the opposite story. She stayed in the ground 500 years too long. When she finally emerged from her hole in the Prime Kindergarten, the war was already over. Everyone was gone. The other crystal gems found her alone in the empty canyon, a quartz, who came out too late and too small. Standard amethysts are supposed to be tall and broad, soldier-sized like the ones we see in the human zoo later in the series. Our amethyst is short because she was overcooked, left underground past her intended incubation period. She's supposed to be twice her size, and that knowledge haunts her throughout the show, this feeling that she came out wrong, that she's defective, that she's not what she was supposed to be. But here's something from the official Steven Universe podcast that adds even more weight to the kindergarten storyline. Hilary Florido, who served as storyboard supervisor on the show, said in the podcast's 8th episode of the 2nd season that there are no true filler episodes in Steven Universe. Homeworld information is seeded slowly, even throughout early Season 1. She explained that many of the background gem structures, the technology, the architecture that fills out the edges of the frame, those were improvised by storyboard artists based on what seemed cool at the time. Joe Johnston, who was a co-executive producer, confirmed this. They'd throw in a cool-looking pillar or a strange piece of machinery without knowing exactly what it meant yet, and later it would all get woven into the larger mythology. The kindergartens were part of that slow reveal. Hints about how gems are made were scattered throughout the first 2 seasons before the show ever fully explained the process. Peridot reveals something in the episode It Could Have Been Great, which is the 20th episode of Season 3, that makes the kindergarten concept even more chilling. She pulls up a holographic projection at the moon base showing what Earth was supposed to look like if colonization had been completed. The image shows a geometrically carved, completely lifeless husk. The entire planet hollowed out, reshaped into a gem production facility with structures covering every surface. No oceans, no forests, no atmosphere worth mentioning. Just rock and gem architecture. That's what was planned for our planet. Every kindergarten on Earth was a step toward turning the entire world into that image. And there's one tiny detail Peridot drops in that same episode that I think is genuinely haunting. She mentions casually that it does not rain on the gem homeworld. It doesn't rain there. Think about what that implies. Homeworld has been so thoroughly mined, so completely drained by millennia of gem production that it doesn't even have weather anymore. Whatever natural systems the planet once had are gone. The diamonds didn't just build a civilization on Homeworld. They consumed it. They ate their own planet alive and then went looking for more. That search for more is what brought them to Earth in the first place. The gem colonization process isn't just about individual kindergartens. It's a galaxy-spanning operation connected by a network called the Galaxy Warp. the galaxy warp is a system of warp pads that allow instantaneous travel between planets. On Earth, there's a central galaxy warp hub with pads leading to homeworld and various colonies. After the rebellion, the crystal gems destroyed the homeworld warp, cutting off direct travel between Earth and the Gem Empire. The broken pad sits at the galaxy warp hub like a severed bridge, a physical reminder that Earth's connection to the Gem Empire was deliberately severed. Peridot attempted to repair the homeworld warp during her initial mission to Earth using her flask robenoids, small spherical repair drones, to collect and reassemble the broken pieces. She partially succeeded but couldn't complete the repair without her full equipment. Her persistence in trying to fix that warp pad was one of the first signs that Homeworld was actively trying to re-establish contact with Earth, which hadn't happened in over 4,000 years. When a Homeworld vessel appeared on Earth for the first time in millennia, the crystal gems were genuinely alarmed. They'd assumed they were forgotten. They weren't. The colonization process goes beyond just kindergartens and warp pads. Gem colonies involve reshaping entire worlds. The surfaces of colonized planets are covered in gem structures. The ecosystems are destroyed. The atmospheres are altered. In the episode Jungle Moon, which is the 10th episode of Season 5, Stevani experiences a memory that belongs to Pink Diamond, showing Yellow Diamond commanding a fleet of dropships to invade a planet. Yellow scolds a Nephrite pilot for not being prepared cycles before the invasion was scheduled to begin. The scene gives us a glimpse of what gem colonization looks like from the command level. It's clinical, efficient. The planet being invaded is just a number on a list. The living things on its surface don't register as a concern. Jasper's psychology is worth pausing on because it illuminates something important about what the colonization system does to the gems who serve it. Jasper was made on Earth, she's an Earth gem, but she identifies entirely with Homeworld. She was created in the Beta Kindergarten during the war, produced as a soldier to fight the Crystal Gem Rebellion, and she emerged perfect. That perfection became her entire identity. She's the ideal quartz. She served under Pink Diamond and fought against Rose Quartz in the war. When Pink Diamond was supposedly shattered, Jasper's world collapsed. Her diamond was gone. The colony she was made for was abandoned. The rebels who killed her diamond were left alive on the planet she was manufactured to protect. When Jasper finally arrives on Earth thousands of years later, in the episode The Return, which is the 51st episode of Season 1, she's consumed by a need to prove herself. She needs to defeat Rose Quartz, or at least Rose Quartz's legacy. She needs to validate the war she was created for. She needs to prove that the gem who shattered her diamond wasn't stronger than her. Every fight Jasper picks, every challenge she issues is driven by this bottomless need for her existence to mean something. She's the perfect product of a system that defines worth by function. She functions perfectly. And she's miserable. Jasper eventually tries to force a fusion with lapis lazuli, creating malachite, a deeply unstable and violent fusion. It's the toxic relationship metaphor that the show handles with extraordinary care. Lapis agrees to fuse with Jasper not out of love but out of a desire for control. She uses the fusion to trap Jasper at the bottom of the ocean, holding them both prisoner. She tells Steven she's doing it to protect him, but the truth is more complicated. Lapis is using Jasper as much as Jasper is using her. They're both trapped. They're both suffering. And the fusion is held together not by harmony, but by mutual dysfunction. Malachite is what happens when fusion is used as a weapon rather than an expression of connection. The gem mural in the episode Sirius Steven, which is the 8th episode of Season 1, was one of the earliest pieces of deep lore the show planted. It was created before the crew had fully established the show's complete mythology. Joe Johnston drew an initial version of the mural, which Rebecca Sugar then revised because it revealed too much too early. In the official podcast, Johnston and Florido mentioned that fans crawl all over that mural with analysis, and they said they could talk more about what it really shows after some exciting revelations in the show had played out. That mural was hiding answers to questions the audience wouldn't know to ask for another 4 seasons. So gems drain entire planets to reproduce. They hollow out worlds and leave behind lifeless canyons where ecosystems used to be. That's the foundation of gem civilization. But what happens to the gems who fought against that system and lost? What happens to the ones who were shattered in battle, broken into fragments and left behind on a planet that Homeworld no longer cared about? Their fate might be the single most horrifying thing the show ever depicted, and the show doesn't shy away from making you feel it. After the rebellion ended and Pink Diamond was believed to have been shattered, Homeworld decided that Earth was no longer worth colonizing. It was a failed project, a lost cause. But Yellow Diamond wasn't the type to let a failure go to waste. She had another use for the planet. The shattered remains of fallen crystal gems, the fragments of gems who had been destroyed during the war, were still scattered across the battlefields, and Homeworld collected them. They took those shards, those broken pieces of what used to be living, thinking beings, and they forced them to fuse together, not through the natural consensual process of gem fusion that the show treats as something intimate and beautiful. This was forced fusion. Gem shards crammed together through an unknown process, binding the fragments of completely different gems into single, twisted forms. The resulting creatures are called cluster gems, also known as gem mutants or artificial fusions, and they are, without question, the darkest thing in the entire show. In general, cluster gems take the form of various body parts and limbs joined to other appendages. Arms connected to legs, connected to hands, connected to faces. The limbs are mismatched colors, dark blue next to rust, next to violet, next to olive green, because they originally belonged to completely different gems. Each color represents a different person whose body was broken apart and then forcibly merged with the broken parts of someone else. They're not monsters in the traditional sense, they're victims. Shattered soldiers whose remains were desecrated by the empire they fought against. The episode Keeping It Together, which is the 8th episode of Season 2, is where we first encounter the cluster gems. Steven and Garnet discover them deep beneath the prime kindergarten in a wrecked control room. The scene is genuinely unsettling. A pillar begins to shake, and small cluster gems start emerging from the columns. Then the pillar breaks open entirely, and a massive hand cluster, a giant hand made of fused gem shards, crawls out. It has 4 eyes arranged in a rotational pattern on its palm. It twitches and writhes because the shards inside it are trying to escape the fusion. They don't want to be together. They're in pain. Garnet's reaction to seeing the cluster gems is one of the most important moments in the show. She nearly unfuses. Ruby and Sapphire almost separate because the horror of what they're seeing is too much for Garnet to process. For Garnet, fusion is sacred. She exists because Ruby and Sapphire love each other so deeply that they choose to be one being together. Forced fusion is the absolute violation of everything Garnet represents. It's fusion without consent, without love, without choice. It's 2 beings crammed into one body against their will, unable to separate, unable to understand what happened to them. Ruby, speaking through Garnet, says she believes the cluster gems were created as punishment by Homeworld for the rebellion. The cluster gems attack other gems when they sense them, but not because they're aggressive. They're desperately trying to find their missing shards. They want to be whole again. They can feel that parts of themselves are missing, and they lash out at any gem they encounter because somewhere in their broken consciousness, they think the gem might have the piece they're looking for. That's not malice. That's suffering so profound it looks like violence. But the individual cluster gems were just prototypes, test runs, because Yellow Diamond had something much, much bigger planned. Deep in the Earth's mantle, buried at the planet's core, Homeworld planted the cluster. Capital T, capital C, a massive forced fusion composed of millions of gem shards. Millions. Not hundreds, not thousands. Millions of shattered gem fragments, all crammed together into a single geo-weapon buried inside the planet. Peridot explains in the prime kindergarten control room that if the cluster ever took its physical form, it would be much bigger than the Earth itself. It wouldn't just emerge from the planet, it would destroy the planet by emerging. The Earth would be ripped apart from the inside out. The cluster was intended as a weapon. Yellow Diamond wanted to use it to destroy other worlds. First, it would obliterate Earth, proving the concept worked, and then it could be deployed against other targets. The planet where Pink Diamond's rebellion happened, where her fellow Diamond was supposedly murdered, would be turned into the weapon that enforces obedience across the rest of the Empire. That's not just strategic thinking. That's cruelty elevated to an art form. In the episode Gem Drill, which is the second episode of Season 3, Steven and Peridot drill down to the center of the Earth to try to stop the cluster before it takes form. But when they reach it, they can't destroy it. Steven falls unconscious and finds himself in a psychic space where he can hear the voices of the gem shards. They're talking to each other, searching for each other, crying out in confusion. They don't know where they are or what happened to them. They just know they're incomplete and they need to find the rest of themselves. Steven convinces the shards not to form a body. Instead, he encourages them to bond with each other, to find comfort in each other. Rather than trying to force themselves into a shape, the shards begin doing something unprecedented. They start bubbling themselves. This is the first and only time in the series that a gem creates a bubble before ever taking physical form. The shards inside the cluster form billions of tiny bubbles, and Steven merges them all into one immense bubble, completely encasing the cluster and preventing it from destroying the Earth. In the episode Reunited, which is the 23rd episode of Season 5, the cluster makes a dramatic return. Yellow Diamond and Blue Diamond's warships disturb its resting place, and the cluster partially emerges. But it doesn't destroy the Earth. Instead, it forms just a tiny fraction of its full size, a massive arm roughly the size of a diamond ship, and it punches Yellow Diamond's warship. The first thing the cluster ever does with its body is fight against the Empire that created it. That's not programmed behavior. That's a choice made by millions of shattered gem fragments who decided together that they weren't going to be used as a weapon against the planet that gave them shelter. Later, in Steven Universe Future, Yellow Diamond vows to restore as many shattered gems inside the cluster as she can. The episode Homeworld Bound shows Yellow using her reconstructive powers to put gem fragments back together, essentially undoing the forced fusions and returning the shards to their original forms. It's the beginning of a healing process for a wound that's been festering for thousands of years. There's a small detail that fans love to point out about the cluster. In the episode Keep Beach City Weird, which is the 31st episode of Season 1, the character Ronaldo, who is a human conspiracy theorist, rants about polymorphic sentient rocks who are here to hollow out the Earth. He's treated as a joke, a tinfoil hat weirdo. But he was right about everything. The rocks are sentient. They are polymorphic. And the plan was to hollow out the Earth. Sometimes the conspiracy theorist is just describing reality before everyone else catches up. Pearl also dropped a piece of lore early in the series, in the 5th episode of Season 1, Fribo, that ties into the cluster storyline. She tried to explain to Steven that gem shards have a powerful partial consciousness that has been harnessed by gems throughout history to create semi-sentient drone soldiers. These drones had the capacity to follow basic orders, and gems once created an entire army of them. But the shards overdeveloped inside their uniforms and eventually turned on their commanders. Even thousands of years ago, gem civilization was experimenting with the remains of shattered gems. The cluster wasn't a new idea. It was the perfection of an old one. The cluster represents what happens when a civilization treats people as resources, when individual lives are just raw materials to be repurposed after they've served their function. The shattered crystal gems who make up the cluster didn't just die in battle. They were denied even the peace of death. Their remains were collected, fused against their will, and turned into a bomb. And the fact that Steven's response to this horror wasn't to destroy the cluster, but to talk to it, to listen to the suffering inside it, and offer comfort, that's the entire philosophy of the show distilled into a single scene. But there's one story in Steven Universe that shows what happens when a single person is treated as disposable, not shattered and fused into a weapon, just forgotten, left behind, abandoned by someone she loved more than anything in the universe. And it might be the saddest backstory the show ever told. Spinel was created at least 6,000 years before the events of Steven Universe the movie, which came out in 2019. She was made for a single purpose, to be Pink Diamond's best friend. That's it. That was her entire reason for existing. Pink Diamond had recently lost her first pearl, who had been taken away by White Diamond after Pink threw a tantrum that damaged the pearl's eye. Pink was lonely. She was the youngest diamond, constantly overlooked by her older counterparts, and she needed someone to play with. So Spinel was created to fill that role. The two of them spent their time together in Pink Diamond's garden, a beautiful dome-covered floating structure in space, filled with colorful flowers and winding paths. Spinel was designed to be endlessly energetic, endlessly enthusiastic, endlessly willing to play whatever game Pink wanted to play. She stretched her body into ridiculous shapes. She bounced around the garden, making Pink laugh. She existed in a state of pure, uncomplicated joy because that's what she was made to feel. Her entire consciousness was oriented around making Pink Diamond happy. And for a while, it worked. They played together. They laughed together. Spinel was genuinely happy because her purpose aligned with her desires. She wanted to make Pink happy, and Pink wanted someone to play with. It was simple, but Pink Diamond grew up. Or at least she grew past Spinel. Over time, Pink became less and less enthusiastic about constantly playing the same games with the same companion. She wanted more. She wanted a colony. She wanted to be taken seriously by the other diamonds. She wanted responsibility and purpose beyond entertaining herself in a garden. And Spinel, who was designed to be a playmate and nothing else, couldn't offer her any of that. Rebecca Sugar explained in an interview what was really going on inside Pink Diamond's head during this period. She said that Pink found Spinel grating and overwhelming. Pink wanted to feel like she was moving forward, and Spinel represented the stage of her life she was trying to leave behind. Sugar described it as Pink not really thinking about how her actions would affect other people, which she noted is a bit of a recurring theme for Pink Diamond. She just wanted to move on. When Yellow and Blue Diamond finally granted Pink her colony, Earth, she made a decision. She didn't want to bring Spinel. She didn't want to explain that she'd outgrown her. She didn't want to have the difficult conversation that comes with telling someone you don't need them anymore. So instead of being honest, Pink Diamond told Spinel they were going to play a new game. The game was simple. Spinel had to stand perfectly still in the garden. She couldn't move. She had to stay exactly where she was until Pink came back. And then they'd play together again. Spinel was excited to play the game. She loved games. She stood in her spot, perfectly still, smiling, waiting for Pink to come back. Pink Diamond never came back. Spinel stood motionless in that garden for 6,000 years. Think about that number. 6,000 years. Civilizations rose and fell on Earth during that time. Humans went from the Bronze Age to the Space Age. The entire plot of the show happened. The Gem War, the corruption, Steven's birth, every battle, every revelation, every moment of growth and change and heartbreak that makes up the story of Steven Universe happened while Spinel was standing in a dead garden, alone, waiting for someone who had already forgotten about her. Vines grew over her body. The flowers in the garden withered and died. The structure itself began falling apart. The dome cracked. The paths crumbled. Everything around Spinel decayed while she stayed perfectly still, exactly as she'd been told. She didn't move because Pink told her not to. She didn't move because she believed Pink was coming back. She didn't move because moving would mean acknowledging that she'd been abandoned, and she couldn't face that truth. There's a detail about the garden that most viewers don't catch. During Spinel's flashback sequence in the movie, the flowers visible in the background include forget-me-nots, which traditionally symbolize remembrance and enduring love. There are also red spider lilies, which in many cultures represent the loss of a loved one. The show's artists chose those specific flowers deliberately. Even the plants are telling Spinel's story. Spinel finally learned the truth when Steven broadcast his message to the entire universe at the end of the original series. That message was meant to be hopeful, a declaration of peace and change. But when it reached the garden, it told Spinel something devastating. Pink Diamond no longer existed. She had given up her physical form to have a child, a half-human son named Stephen. Pink hadn't just abandoned Spinel, she'd started a whole new life, made new friends, fallen in love, had a child, and then ceased to exist entirely, all without ever once going back to the garden. Spinel's sadness turned to fury. She changed her appearance, her cheerful design becoming angular and sharp, her movements becoming violent and erratic. She arrived on Earth with a massive injector filled with biopoison that would kill all organic life on the planet. And she carried a gem rejuvenator, a homeworld weapon designed to reset gems' minds to their factory default settings. She used it on the crystal gems, erasing their memories and reverting them to their original programming. Pearl became a mindless servant. Ruby and Sapphire separated. Amethyst lost every bit of growth she'd experienced over the series. Bismuth recognized the rejuvenator immediately. It was a tool Homeworld used to punish rebellious gems by wiping their identities, resetting them to blank slates, destroying everything that made them who they were while keeping the body functional. It's not death. It's something arguably worse. It's the erasure of self while the self is still technically alive. What makes Spinel's story so devastating isn't the revenge, it's the original wound. Pink Diamond didn't shatter Spinel. She didn't bubble her or imprison her. She just told her to stay still and then never thought about her again. The cruelty wasn't intentional. It was negligent. Pink Diamond didn't hate Spinel. She just stopped caring. And for a being whose entire existence was built around being cared about, that absence of care was the most destructive thing possible. Rebecca Sugar said something about Spinel's character that I think is really important for understanding her thematic purpose. Sugar explained that there's a quality to Spinel that's also about the show's young audience having grown up. She said Spinel represents all the kids who have grown out of the show and left it behind, and how silly it can feel to be working so hard to make a cartoon when there are people who will just leave. That's an incredibly personal statement from a creator about the relationship between art and audience. Spinel isn't just a character in the story, she's a metaphor for the fear that the things you pour your heart into will eventually be outgrown and forgotten. In real life, Spinel gems have been used historically as crown jewels, and are believed to dispel negative energies and preserve youthfulness. That's an ironic parallel to a character who spent 6,000 years frozen in time, never aging, never changing, waiting for a monarch who was never coming back. The Steven Universe movie itself is structured around the theme of returning to your starting point. Spinel's rejuvenator resets the crystal gems to their factory defaults, and Steven has to help each one of them remember who they are by reenacting the experiences that shaped them. To restore Amethyst's memory, he recreates the bonding experiences they shared. To restore Ruby and Sapphire, he recreates their first meeting so they'll fuse into Garnet again. To restore Pearl, he has to make her owner disappear, because Pearl was programmed to serve whoever she belongs to, and the only way to break that programming is to take the owner away. Steven fuses with his father Greg to create Stig, a fusion whose performance of the song Independent Together reminds Pearl of what it means to choose for yourself rather than serve someone else. Each restoration is essentially a condensed version of that character's entire arc. The movie is replaying the show in miniature, and the emotional core of each restoration isn't about power or combat. It's about relationship. Steven can only bring his friends back by remembering what made their connection real in the first place. That's not a weapon the villain can counter because it's not a weapon at all. It's love. And Spinel can't compete with it because love is the one thing she was designed to give but was never properly given in return. The biopoison that Spinel injects into the earth through her massive injector is essentially the same technology used to create kindergartens, but in reverse. Instead of growing gems by draining life, it simply drains life without creating anything. It's pure destruction. The injector was a homeworld device that Spinel weaponized, turning a tool of colonization into a tool of annihilation. Everything about Spinel's attack mirrors Pink Diamond's colonization of Earth, just stripped of any pretense of purpose. Pink came to Earth and destroyed its ecosystem to make new gems. Spinel comes to Earth and destroys its ecosystem because she's in pain. Same tool, same damage, different reasons. neither cares enough about the planet to stop. The song Drift Away, which plays during Spinel's flashback in the garden, is one of the most emotionally devastating pieces of music in the entire franchise. It's performed by Sarah Stiles, who voices Spinel, and it chronicles the 6,000 years of waiting in real time. The lyrics move from cheerful patience to quiet doubt to desperate hope, to the crushing realization that Pink Diamond is never coming back. The garden deteriorates around Spinel as the song progresses. Colors drain, flowers wilt. The dome cracks, and Spinel stands in the center of it all, her smile slowly fading, vines growing over her body. Frozen in the pose Pink Diamond left her in. It's a sequence that manages to be both the saddest and most beautiful thing the show ever produced. At the end of the movie, Spinel doesn't find closure through revenge or through reconciliation with Pink Diamond. Because Pink Diamond is gone. She can't get the apology she deserves, she can't get an explanation, she can only move forward. The diamonds take her in and give her a new home on Homeworld. It's not a perfect ending, it's just a beginning, which is maybe the most honest thing the show could have offered her. If you're still listening and you're enjoying this deep dive, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this every week. Now, let's keep going. Because while Spinel waited 6,000 years in silence, there was another character who carried a secret for almost exactly as long. And the weight of that secret nearly destroyed her. Pearl is not just any pearl. She was Pink Diamond's personal pearl, custom made for her, designed to serve her and her alone. And she was the only gem in the entire universe who knew the truth about Pink Diamond's identity. She kept that secret for over 5,000 years. 5,000 years of watching everyone around her grieve a death that never happened, argue about a murder that was staged, and build their entire understanding of history around a lie that she was physically forbidden from correcting. The episode A Single Pale Rose, which is the 18th episode of Season 5, is where the truth finally comes out. It aired on May 7th, 2018, and Rebecca Sugar described it alongside the preceding episode Can't Go Back as huge episodes that we've been building to for a very long time. The production crew had been waiting since pre-production, over 5 years before the episode aired, to reveal Rose Quartz's biggest secret. 5 years of knowing the twist and carefully seeding clues that the audience would only understand in retrospect. In the episode, Steven enters Pearl's gemstone and travels through layers of her memories. He meets a personification of Pearl's ability to compartmentalize, a version of Pearl that organizes and files away different aspects of her experience. Steven goes deeper, visiting Pearl's traumatic memories of Rose Quartz's pregnancy and the aftermath of the Gem War. He arrives at what appears to be the moment after Pink Diamond's shattering. He sees gem shards on the ground. He sees Rose Quartz holding her sword, crying in despair. But when he steps closer, he realizes it's not Rose, it's Pearl, shapeshifted into Rose's form. She reveals Pink Diamond's undamaged gemstone in her hand. Steven goes even further back and finds himself inside Pink Diamond's palanquin, overhearing a conversation between Rose and Pearl. Pearl is hesitant about what Rose is asking her to do. Rose insists and tells Pearl they'll be free afterward. Pearl finally agrees. And then, to Steven's shock, Rose Quartz transforms back into her true form. She's Pink Diamond. She creates fake diamond shards from dirt, swallows them, and gives Pearl one final command as a diamond. Never speak of this again. No one can know. That command is the key to understanding Pearl's entire character throughout the series. As a diamond order, it's not a request, it's physically binding. Pearl literally cannot disobey it. Her hands fly to her mouth, covering it, sealing the words inside. Throughout the entire show, Pearl's most recognizable gesture has been covering her mouth with both hands, usually when something related to Rose or Homeworld comes up. Viewers always assumed it was a personality quirk, a sign of her dramatic, anxious nature. But it was the gag order manifesting physically. Every time Pearl's hands went to her mouth, she was fighting against the compulsion to speak and being physically prevented from doing so. Pearl found a loophole. Pink Diamond's exact words were that Pearl could never tell anyone what happened, So Pearl didn't tell Stephen, she showed him. She lured him into her gemstone and let him witness the memories directly. The order forbade speaking. It didn't forbid showing. That's how precise and desperate Pearl's thinking had to be to get around a 5,000-year-old diamond command. She had to find the exact crack in the wording and slip the truth through it. There's an early clue in the show that almost nobody caught until after the reveal. Bismuth, the weapons forger who served with Rose during the rebellion, proudly explains in her debut episode, which is the 24th episode of season 3, that she designed Rose's sword specifically so it could poof gems but never shatter them. A single strike would destabilize a gem's physical form, sending them back into their gemstone, but the gemstone itself would remain intact. The sword was physically incapable of shattering a diamond. So how could Rose Quartz have shattered pink diamond with a sword that can't shatter anyone? The answer, of course, is that she didn't. The shattering was faked. The sword poofed pink diamond. The dirt shards she'd swallowed fell to the ground to simulate a shattered gemstone. And Pearl, shape-shifted into Rose's form, carried out the attack in front of witnesses, while the real pink diamond's gem was tucked safely away. Pearl's anxiety about fusion takes on new meaning after this revelation. Throughout the show, Pearl is notably uncomfortable when Stephen fuses with others. When Amethyst and Garnet prepare to form Sugalite, Pearl tries to cover Stephen's eyes. When Stephen and Connie first fuse into Stevani, Pearl immediately tells them to unfuse. Fans always chalk this up to Pearl being overprotective and jealous. But there's another possibility. Pearl may have been terrified that fusing with Stephen could somehow expose the secret about his diamond heritage. If another gem merged consciousness with Stephen and felt the truth of his gemstone, the secret could have been revealed. Pearl spent 5,000 years guarding that secret. Every fusion was a potential breach. The weight of what Pearl carried is almost impossible to comprehend. She watched Garnet, her close friend, grieve for Pink Diamond for thousands of years. She watched the entire Crystal Gem movement build its identity around the story of Rose Quartz, the heroic rebel who shattered a tyrant. She knew every word of that story was wrong, and she couldn't correct any of it. She attended memorials for a diamond who wasn't dead. She listened to speeches about a murder that was a performance. She carried the knowledge that everything her friends believed about their own history was a lie, and she did it alone for 50 centuries, because a diamond told her to be quiet. When Stephen finally learns the truth and tells Amethyst and Garnet, their shock is visible. But Pearl's line in that moment is heartbreaking. She says, "I wanted to tell you for so long." That sentiment mirrored the production crew's own feelings. They'd been waiting years to tell the audience this secret. And Pearl had been waiting millennia. Pearl held one secret for 5,000 years. But the event that created the need for that secret, the cataclysm that ended the Gem War and forced everyone into their lies and their grief and their hiding, left scars far deeper than any deception. The corrupting light that the diamonds unleashed on Earth didn't just end a war. It erased the identities of thousands of gems in a single flash. And the science behind how it works is more disturbing than most people realize. At the very end of the rebellion, the 3 remaining diamonds faced 2 enormous losses. One of their own, Pink Diamond, had been supposedly shattered, and the colony she'd been given, Earth, was slipping out of their control. The crystal gems were winning. Homeworld's forces on Earth were being pushed back, and the diamonds were furious. So they decided to end it. All of it. White Diamond, Yellow Diamond, and Blue Diamond combined their powers and launched a single devastating attack against the Earth. It's called the Corrupting Light. The intention behind it was total annihilation. They wanted to destroy every gem on the planet. Wipe the slate clean. If they couldn't have Earth, then nothing on it would survive. But the attack didn't work the way they planned. Instead of destroying the gems on Earth, it corrupted them. Corruption in Steven Universe is something like a psychic disease. It warps a gem's mind and body simultaneously, transforming sentient beings into feral monsters. Corrupted gems lose their ability to think, to communicate, to remember who they are. Their physical forms become distorted, mutating into animalistic shapes that bear no resemblance to the gem they used to be. They're still alive, technically. Their gemstones are intact, but everything that made them a person is gone. They're locked inside their own bodies, unable to reach the surface of their own consciousness. The attack's incomplete power explains why it corrupted instead of destroyed. The combined blast of all 4 diamonds was needed for full lethal effect. But Pink Diamond wasn't part of the attack because she was supposed to be dead. Her absence weakened the blast just enough that it fell short of its destructive intention, and instead produced this horrifying middle ground. This state of being where the gems survived but their minds were shattered beyond recognition. This detail becomes important later in the series, when Steven tries to heal corrupted gems. He makes progress, managing to partially restore some of them, but the corruption always reasserts itself. The reason is symmetrical. If all 4 diamonds were needed for the attack to work at full power, then all 4 diamonds are needed to undo it. White Diamond's absence from the early healing attempts is specifically why they fail. It takes Steven gathering all 3 remaining diamonds together, with his own Pink Diamond powers filling the 4th slot, to finally reverse the corruption at the end of the series. The corrupting light itself is composed of 3 distinct elements that correspond to each diamond's unique destructive ability. Yellow Diamond can disrupt gems' physical forms, destabilizing their light-based bodies. Blue Diamond can override emotions, forcing feelings onto other gems against their will. White Diamond can overpower minds, taking direct control of a gem's consciousness. The corrupting light appears to combine the worst aspects of all 3 powers simultaneously. It warps the body like Yellow's attack, overwrites the emotions like Blue's, and shatters the mind like White's. All at once, in a single flash of light. Nephrite, the gem formerly known as Centipedal, is one of the corrupted gems who provides the most detailed account of what the attack was like. In the episode Monster Reunion, which is the 14th episode of Season 3, she communicates through drawings and fragmented speech because her corruption prevents her from expressing herself normally. She describes the attack as a sound, a song. Steven theorizes based on her account that the corruption may function like a broadcast, a signal transmitted through light and sound that rewrites a gem's fundamental programming. There's a heartbreaking detail about Nephrite's corruption that most viewers don't realize. She was a homeworld gem. She wasn't a crystal gem. She wasn't a rebel. She was a loyal Nephrite pilot serving on Earth during the war. When Homeworld ordered the evacuation before the corrupting light, there was chaos. Gems fled the planet en masse through spaceships and warp pads, but Nephrite had been separated from her crew. She fell behind because she went looking for them. She chose to find her team rather than save herself, and because of that choice, she was still on Earth when the light hit. She got corrupted because she was loyal, because she cared about her crew more than her own safety. The Diamond's own attack, meant to punish the rebels, caught their own soldiers in the crossfire. Not every gem on Earth was corrupted. A handful survived with their minds intact, each protected by specific circumstances. Rose Quartz, who was actually Pink Diamond, shielded Garnet and Pearl with her shield. The shield, being a diamond-level power, was strong enough to deflect the corrupting light and protect whoever was behind it. Amethyst survived because she was still incubating underground in the Prime Kindergarten. She hadn't emerged yet, so the rock above her blocked the light. Lapis Lazuli survived because she was trapped inside a mirror, a gem artifact that apparently shielded her from exposure. Bismuth survived because Rose had previously bubbled her, and the bubble acted as a barrier. Lapis Lazuli's story deserves its own moment here, because it's one of the most tragically overlooked pieces of lore in the show. Lapis is a homeworld gem. She was on Earth during the war, not as a combatant, but as an informant or observer. A crystal gem found her and mistook her for an enemy, or maybe didn't care about the distinction. They poofed her and trapped her inside a magical mirror, not a bubble, a mirror. Mirrors in gem culture are information storage devices. A gem trapped in one can be used to replay and retrieve information. Lapis was essentially turned into a search engine against her will. She stayed in that mirror for thousands of years. When the corrupting light hit, someone fleeing the blast stepped on the mirror, cracking Lapis's gemstone. That crack caused her immense pain and limited her abilities for the rest of the series until Steven eventually healed it. But the thing that makes Lapis's imprisonment so awful isn't just the duration. It's the awareness. Unlike corruption, which destroys the mind, being trapped in a mirror leaves you conscious. Lapis was aware the entire time. She could see and hear everything happening around her. She just couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't do anything except exist inside a flat pane of glass while the world happened around her. When the crystal gems eventually found the mirror, they didn't free her. They used her. Pearl showed the mirror to Steven as an educational tool, something to help him learn about gem history. Nobody realized, or perhaps nobody cared to check, that there was a person trapped inside. It was Steven who finally figured it out. He talked to the mirror, and Lapis communicated back through fragmented reflections. He pulled her gem from the back of the mirror and freed her. She'd been imprisoned for roughly 5,000 years, and a 13-year-old kid was the first person to treat her like she mattered. Lapis's reaction to being freed is telling. She's angry. Not just at Homeworld, which abandoned her. Not just at the crystal gems, who imprisoned her. She's angry at everyone and everything. She steals the entire ocean and uses it to build a tower reaching into space, trying to get back to Homeworld. That's how desperate she is. She drains the Earth's ocean, nearly destroying the planet's ecosystem in the process, just to build a staircase home. And when she finally gets to Homeworld, she discovers it's changed. It's not the home she remembers. She's been gone for 5,000 years, and everything she knew has moved on without her. Lapis is one of the most powerful gems in the show. She can control water on a planetary scale. She once held back the entire ocean while maintaining a fusion with Jasper at the bottom of the sea for months. She's a terraformer, a type of gem designed to reshape planetary surfaces. That kind of power in the hands of someone with that much unprocessed trauma makes her one of the most complex characters in the series. She's not a villain. She's not a hero. She's someone who's been hurt so badly and for so long that she doesn't know how to exist without either running from pain or inflicting it on others. The irony of Lapis's survival is something the show lets you sit with rather than spelling out. She was saved by being imprisoned. If she'd been free on Earth's surface during the corrupting light, she would have been corrupted like everyone else. Her cage protected her. The worst thing that ever happened to her is also the reason she's still herself. That's the kind of moral complexity Steven Universe handles, with a gentleness that's almost unfair for a show on Cartoon Network. Bismuth's survival follows a similar tragic irony. Bismuth was one of the original crystal gems, a blacksmith and weapons forger who built the physical infrastructure of the rebellion. She's the one who forged the weapons the crystal gems used to fight Homeworld. She built their arenas. She designed their battle gear. She was passionate, creative, and fiercely loyal to Rose Quartz's cause, but Bismuth and Rose had a fundamental disagreement about how far the rebellion should go. Bismuth created a weapon called the Breaking Point, a device specifically designed to shatter gems, to destroy them permanently. In the Gem War, the crystal gems poofed their enemies but didn't shatter them. Rose's philosophy was that gems could be defeated without being destroyed. Bismuth argued that they were in a war and they needed to be willing to go further. She wanted to shatter the diamonds. She wanted to end the conflict decisively by eliminating the leadership. Rose refused. She took the breaking point and she bubbled Bismuth, trapping her inside a bubble and hiding her in Lion's Mane where nobody would find her. Rose told the other crystal gems that Bismuth had been lost in battle. She lied. For thousands of years, Garnet, Pearl, and everyone else believed their friend had been killed by Homeworld forces. In reality, she was in a bubble behind a waterfall in a pocket dimension inside a magic lion, put there by the person she trusted most. When Steven eventually frees Bismuth and the truth comes out, the betrayal hits hard. Rose Quartz, the great liberator, the gem who started a rebellion in the name of freedom and choice, imprisoned one of her closest allies rather than having a difficult conversation about the ethics of their war. And here's the thing that makes Bismuth's situation even more painful in hindsight. The breaking point was designed to shatter gems. Rose refused to use it because she believed in preserving life. But Rose was secretly Pink Diamond. She had faked her own shattering. The entire war was built on a lie about shattering. Rose's refusal to let Bismuth shatter diamonds takes on a very different meaning when you realize that Rose herself had staged a diamond shattering. She wasn't protecting gem life on principle. She was protecting a secret. If Bismuth had actually shattered a diamond, it would have proven that shattering was possible in a way that might have unraveled the fiction of Pink Diamond's death. The gem war itself lasted for approximately 1,000 years before Pink Diamond staged her shattering. During that time, Pink would switch back and forth between her two identities. She'd be Pink Diamond on some days, playing along as a leader, meeting with Yellow and Blue Diamond, pretending to be trying to quash the rebellion. Then she'd shapeshift into Rose Quartz and lead the rebels. She was literally fighting against herself, on both sides of the same war, hoping that if the rebellion looked scary enough, the other diamonds would just give up and leave Earth alone. But Yellow and Blue Diamond didn't give up. They sent more forces. They escalated. They began the Beta Kindergarten to produce emergency soldiers. The war kept growing because Pink didn't have the courage to just tell her fellow Diamond the truth. If she had stood up as Pink Diamond and said she didn't want to colonize Earth, things might have ended differently. Maybe the other diamonds would have listened. Maybe they wouldn't have. But the war would have been honest. Instead, Pink chose deception, and that deception led to thousands of gems being shattered, corrupted, or lost. The crystal gems who died in battle believed they were fighting against the diamonds. They didn't know they were fighting for one. That's the weight that Steven carries throughout the series. He inherits his mother's gemstone, her powers, and her legacy. But he also inherits the consequences of her choices. Every corrupted gem he encounters is a victim of the war his mother started. Every shattered gem he discovers is a casualty of the conflict his mother prolonged through deception. Every lie that unravels makes it harder for him to see his mother as the hero everyone told him she was. By the time the Pink Diamond truth comes out, Steven has already begun to understand that his mother wasn't a simple hero or a simple villain. She was a complicated person who made choices that had devastating consequences. And he's the one left cleaning up the mess. Greg Universe, Steven's father, is the human who fell in love with Rose Quartz without ever knowing she was a diamond. Greg was a one-man band traveling musician who rolled into Beach City in a van and played a concert that nobody attended except Rose. She was fascinated by him. She'd been alive for thousands of years and had relationships with humans before, but something about Greg was different. Previous human partners had been more like pets to her, beings she found charming but didn't fully understand or respect as equals. Greg was the first human who pushed back. In the episode We Need to Talk, which is the 9th episode of Season 2, Greg tells Rose that he wants to fuse with her because he sees gems fuse, and he wants that level of closeness. Rose laughs. She doesn't take his desire seriously because she doesn't fully see him as an equal. Greg gets frustrated and says something that changes their relationship forever. He tells her that he's not just some human she can find amusing. He's a person with real feelings and he wants a real relationship, one where they talk to each other honestly. That conversation is a turning point for Pink Diamond. A human, a being that her entire civilization considered less than dirt, told her that she needed to take him seriously, and she listened. For possibly the first time in her existence, she listened to someone telling her she was wrong about how she was treating another person. Greg didn't have diamond powers or an army or advanced technology. He just had honesty. And that was enough to change a diamond. Rose eventually chose to have Steven. She gave up her physical form entirely, knowing she would cease to exist, so that a new being could take her place. Steven isn't just Rose's son. He's the proof that a diamond can choose to become something completely new. He's half gem, half human, the first and only being of his kind in the entire universe. His existence is the ultimate rejection of the caste system. He can't be categorized. He can't be assigned a purpose. He's something the system never accounted for. And that's exactly why he's the one who eventually breaks the system open. The show makes it clear that Rose's decision to have Steven was not purely selfless. She had accumulated so much guilt, so many secrets, so much weight from the war and the deception and the people she'd hurt, that creating Steven was partly an escape. She couldn't face what she'd done, so she transformed into someone who would never have to. Steven was born carrying the consequences of choices he didn't make, living a life shaped by a war he never fought, bearing the expectations of a person he never met. That's the central tension of the entire show. How do you build your own identity when you're standing on someone else's rubble? The irony of these survivals is striking. Rose protected 2 gems with her shield. Amethyst was saved by being 500 years late to her own emergence. Lapis was saved by being imprisoned. Bismuth was saved by being betrayed. The crystal gems who survived the corrupting light didn't survive because they were strong or clever. They survived by accident, by imprisonment, and by the protection of a diamond who was secretly on their side. Everyone else, every other crystal gem, every homeworld loyalist who couldn't evacuate in time, was transformed into a mindless creature and left to wander Earth's surface for thousands of years. There's one more detail about corruption that the show establishes later. Jasper, the perfect quartz, eventually corrupts herself. She wasn't present during the original corrupting light attack. Her corruption happens in the episode Earthlings, which is the 23rd episode of Season 3, when she forcibly fuses with a corrupted gem in desperation after losing a fight to Smoky Quartz. The corrupted gem's affliction spreads to Jasper through the fusion, but the show implies that Jasper's psychological state contributed to her vulnerability. She was in the middle of an identity crisis, having lost every anchor of her belief system. Her diamond was supposedly dead. The gem who shattered her diamond turned out to be a child. Everything she believed about herself and her purpose was crumbling. The corruption took hold because her mind was already breaking. This establishes something important about corruption in the Steven Universe. It's not purely a weapon. It can happen naturally under extreme psychological duress. Gems can corrupt on their own when the stress of existence becomes too much for their consciousness to handle. Corruption isn't just a bomb the diamonds dropped. It's a condition that exists at the intersection of trauma and identity. When a gem can no longer maintain a coherent sense of self, their form and mind begin to unravel. The corrupting light was devastating because it forced that breakdown on thousands of gems simultaneously, but the underlying vulnerability was always there. The episode Same Old World, which is the first episode of Season 3, contains a brief flashback showing the moment the corrupting light hit. Gems on the ground look up and see it coming. Some are running toward warp pads, trying to escape. One of them steps on the mirror that Lapis is trapped in, cracking her gemstone. In that moment of panic, in the chaos of an entire army trying to flee a weapon their own leaders deployed, a gem accidentally damages another gem who was already imprisoned. Lapis's cracked gemstone, the injury that causes her so much pain and limits her abilities until Steven heals it, happened because someone stepped on her in the rush to survive. It's a tiny incidental cruelty in the middle of an enormous one. And it's exactly the kind of detail that makes Steven Universe's world building feel so painfully real. The corrupting light ended the gem war. It achieved the diamond's goal of eliminating all opposition on Earth, even if it did so through corruption rather than destruction. But it also created a new kind of suffering that lasted for millennia. The corrupted gems that the crystal gems spend the entire show fighting and capturing. Those monsters that Steven and the team battle and bubble in almost every episode of Season 1, those aren't villains. They're victims. They're soldiers and rebels, and ordinary gems who were caught in a weapon of mass destruction and have been wandering the earth in agony for thousands of years, trapped in bodies they can't control, unable to remember who they are. And the being who bore the greatest responsibility for that weapon, the one who gave it its final push and turned it from a destructive blast into a corrupting one, was White Diamond. Understanding White Diamond means understanding the deepest layer of Steven Universe's mythology, and her true nature raises questions about the show's universe that were never fully answered. White Diamond is the oldest diamond, the most powerful, the leader of the Great Diamond Authority and the supreme matriarch of the entire gem race. She held absolute authority over all gems, including her fellow diamonds. For eons, she remained secluded inside her ship on Homeworld, never leaving, never engaging with the outside universe. She was treated not as a ruler, but as something beyond a ruler. A being so far above the rest of Gem, kind, that she barely seemed to exist in the same reality. When Steven finally meets White Diamond in the episode Legs from Here to Homeworld, the 24th episode of Season 5, her behavior is immediately unsettling. She speaks to Steven as if he's Pink Diamond, completely ignoring the fact that he's a different being. She's calm, warm, almost motherly. She says she's so relieved that Pink's little game is finally over. She treats the entire rebellion, the faked shattering, the 6,000-year absence, all of it, as if it were a child throwing a tantrum. She's not angry, she's not surprised, she's dismissive. And that dismissiveness is more frightening than any display of rage would be. Rebecca Sugar explained at Argentina Comic-Con that White Diamond's personality is symbolic of psychological manipulation and mental abuse. Sugar described how abusers of this kind make their victims question their own reality, using deceit and manipulative words to make victims believe they're in the wrong. White Diamond's ability to control other gems' minds through her light beam is a literal manifestation of this concept. When White takes control of a gem, they turn completely white and lose all autonomy. They become extensions of White's will, puppets performing whatever she wants them to do, while their own consciousness is suppressed. In the episode Change Your Mind, the 29th episode of Season 5, White Diamond controls Pearl, Garnet, and Amethyst simultaneously. She turns them white and uses them as weapons against Steven. She does this casually, almost indifferently, as if controlling the minds of sentient beings is so routine for her that it barely registers as an action worth noting. The crystal gems fight their own bodies while their minds scream silently inside. White Diamond's philosophy is simple and absolute. She believes in perfection. Specifically, she believes that she is perfect and that everything in the universe should aspire to be more like her. Gems who are different, who have their own colors and personalities and desires, are flawed. They need to be corrected. They need to be made white. White Diamond doesn't want to destroy individuality. She wants to bleach it out of existence, replacing every unique consciousness with a copy of her own perfect vision. The moment that finally breaks White Diamond is when Steven separates from his gem. Pink Steven, the pure gem half, demonstrates power that White Diamond cannot control. She tries to take over Pink Steven's mind and fails. For the first time in her existence, White encounters something she cannot dominate, and her reaction is not anger, it's terror. She looks at her hands and sees them turn pink. Imperfect. Flawed. She has been revealed in front of everyone as something other than the perfect being she claimed to be. Her entire identity collapses in that moment. She doesn't know who she is if she's not perfect. Steven comforts her. He tells her that being imperfect is possible, that she can be something other than what she's always been. But she has to leave her own head first. And White Diamond, the most powerful being in the Gem Empire, the architect of a tyrannical civilization that spanned galaxies, listens to a teenager from Earth. She travels to Earth and joins the other diamonds in healing the corrupted gems she helped create. She undoes the damage, not all of it, not perfectly, but she starts. In Steven Universe Future, White Diamond has transformed herself into something unexpected. She's become a meditation guide. She uses a reversed version of her mind control power, allowing other gems to take control of her body so they can get in contact with their own selves. The being who once stripped individuality from others now offers herself as a vessel for self-discovery. It's not a complete redemption. Thousands of years of tyranny can't be erased by a few therapy sessions, But it's a genuine attempt at change from someone who spent her entire existence believing change was impossible. There's a piece of homeworld architecture that connects to White Diamond's philosophy in a way that's genuinely unsettling. In the hallway leading to Yellow Diamond's extraction chamber on Homeworld, the walls are made of sentient gems. They're called sentient walls, and they appear to be gems trapped inside wall structures. They have faces, arms, and rhombus-shaped yellow gemstones on their foreheads. The episode Familiar implies that these are objects with gems imprisoned inside, forced to serve as architecture for eternity. In Homeworld Bound, one of these gems appears to be moving within its wall form, suggesting some degree of awareness. These aren't decorations, they're prisoners, built into the very structure of the Diamond's palace, conscious but unable to do anything except be a wall. That's what White Diamond's perfect society looks like in practice. Even the buildings are made of enslaved people. Gems themselves are effectively immortal. They don't breathe, they don't eat, they don't drink or sleep. They don't age. Their bodies are projections of light, maintained by the power of their gemstone. The only way to truly destroy a gem is to destroy their gemstone. But even that is no longer permanent, because the series eventually shows that shattered gems can be reconstructed. Steven repairs Jasper after accidentally shattering her in the episode Fragments, and Yellow Diamond begins putting shattered gems back together in Homeworld Bound. What was once the ultimate and irreversible destruction turns out to be fixable, given enough power and the willingness to try. Gems also have their own written language. It's inscribed on their temples, their architecture, their technology. Despite every non-corrupted gem in the show speaking English, their written communication uses a completely different script. This language was first visible in Steven's room in the show's pilot episode. It's a small detail, but it reinforces how alien gem culture truly is. They look humanoid, they speak our language, but their civilization, their writing, their values, their understanding of existence, all of it is fundamentally different from anything human. One of the more chilling locations we see in Steven Universe Future is the Reef, a facility on one of White Diamond's colony planets, where pearls are made, customized, and repaired. Steven, Pearl, and Pink Pearl visit the Reef in the episode Volleyball. The facility is run by a shell-shaped gem, whose entire purpose is manufacturing servant-class gems to order. She demonstrates how pearls can be customized. Hair color, eye color, outfit, personality traits. Everything about a pearl can be selected from a menu by her future owner, the same way you might customize a phone case or pick options on a new car. The casualness of it is what makes it horrifying. The Reef treats the creation of sentient beings as a retail transaction, and the being running the facility sees nothing wrong with it, because within Gem Society, pearls aren't people. They're accessories. The Reef is a boutique for living objects. That's the system Pearl escaped from. That's the system that made her. White Diamond represented perfection. A static, unchanging ideal that demanded everyone conform to a single vision. Pink Diamond represented the rejection of that ideal. She looked at the system White built and decided she wanted something else. And the story of how Pink Diamond became Rose Quartz is absolutely packed with details that the vast majority of viewers never caught. The foreshadowing in this show is genuinely remarkable when you know what to look for. Let's start with the gemstone itself. Pink Diamond's gem is cut differently from every other diamond's. White, yellow, and blue diamond all have relatively simple gem cuts, but Pink Diamond has a brilliant cut, which is a modern diamond cutting style with many facets that maximize sparkle and light refraction. In the real world of gemology, producing a brilliant cut diamond requires removing approximately half of the diamond's original mass. You literally cut away half the stone to create that shape. And in Steven Universe, Pink Diamond is approximately half the size of her older counterparts. She's the smallest diamond by a significant margin. The brilliant cut of her gemstone mirrors her physical reality. She's the one who was cut down. Steven's gem has always looked a bit odd compared to what we were told about Rose Quartz. The visible facets of his gemstone resemble the top of a brilliant cut diamond, not a typical quartz formation. More specifically, the facets somewhat resemble what's called a rose-cut diamond, which is a particular style that dates back centuries. The name itself is a clue hiding in plain sight. Rose, diamond, rose diamond. The show put the answer in the shape of his gem from episode 1. When the murals on the moon base first showed the diamonds, each one appeared to have a simple point-cut gemstone. But when yellow and blue diamond were seen in person, their gems were slightly different from the mural depictions. They were still simple cuts, but with minor variations. When Pink Diamond's true appearance was finally revealed, she had the brilliant cut. The murals were stylized. The real gems were more complex, and Pink's was the most complex of all, which tracks with her being the most complicated character in the show. Pink Diamond had a pearl before our pearl. Her original pearl, who would later be known as Volleyball or Pink Pearl, was taken away by White Diamond after Pink threw a tantrum that somehow damaged the pearl's eye. The crack in Pink Pearl's eye is permanent. It never heals. When Pink Pearl eventually appears in Steven Universe Future, in the episode Volleyball, which is the 4th episode of the series, the truth about how her eye was damaged becomes a source of conflict. The injury can't be fixed because it wasn't just physical. It was caused by Pink Diamond's raw emotional power manifesting as destructive force. Pink Diamond's feelings were so intense, so uncontrolled, that they physically broke someone standing next to her. And White Diamond's response to this wasn't to help Pink manage her emotions, it was to take her pearl away and give her a replacement. Remove the evidence of the problem instead of addressing the problem itself. That's White Diamond's philosophy in miniature. If something reveals imperfection, eliminate it. The other rose quartzes, the actual quartz-type gems that were made in Pink Diamond's image on Earth, paid a terrible price for Pink's deception. After the fake shattering, Homeworld needed someone to blame. The rose quartz type had produced the rebel leader who supposedly killed a diamond. So every single rose quartz was personally poofed and bubbled by Pink Diamond's orders, not by some anonymous Homeworld authority. By Pink Diamond's own command, carried out through Blue Diamond's management of the human zoo where they were stored. These gems were imprisoned for millennia. Thousands of years trapped in bubbles, conscious but unable to move or speak, because the diamond they served had impersonated one of them and let them take the fall. They appear in bubbles in the episode that will be all, which is the 15th episode of season 4, and they become actual characters in the Steven Universe Future episode Rosebuds, the 4th episode. When they meet Steven, they express something that hits surprisingly hard. They say they were hurt that their own diamond impersonated them and let them take the blame. They had undying loyalty to Homeworld, and their diamond repaid that loyalty by stealing their identity and condemning them to imprisonment. They dealt with millennia of being scapegoated for Pink Diamond's actions, being threatened with shattering, and realizing they're a walking trauma trigger for practically every modern gem who sees them. Even now that they're free, they can't escape what was done to them. Rose Quartz's powers never made sense for a quartz-type gem. Quartzes like Amethyst and Jasper are offensive fighters. They're tough, aggressive, built for close combat. They have rolling attacks and spin dashes. Rose Quartz's powers were almost entirely defensive and nurturing. Shields, healing tears, plant control, floating, resurrection, emotional empathy so strong she could literally bring the dead back to life. None of that matches the Quartz soldier profile. When former executive producer Ian Jones Cordy was asked about this discrepancy on social media, his response was notably evasive. He couldn't explain it because explaining it would have revealed the twist. Rose's powers didn't match a quartz because she wasn't a quartz. She was a diamond, and diamond-level abilities are fundamentally different from anything a quartz could do. There's another layer to the power discrepancy that's worth dwelling on. Steven's shield is one of his most iconic abilities. He inherited it from Rose, but shields aren't a quartz ability. No other quartz in the show has a shield. Jasper doesn't have one. Amethyst doesn't have one. The other rose quartzes don't demonstrate one. It's a defensive ability, which is the opposite of what quartzes are designed for. Quartzes are offense. They charge, they spin, They slam. A shield is something you give to a protector, not a soldier. And diamonds are protectors of their quartz. The shield makes perfect sense for a diamond who's trying to protect her rebels. It makes no sense for a quartz who's supposed to be charging into battle. Stephen's healing abilities are even more telling. He can heal cracked gemstones with his saliva. He can bring the dead back to life with his tears. He can enter other gems' minds through dreaming. He can possess other beings' bodies. He can float. He can create plant life. Each of these abilities is enormously powerful, and none of them align with any known quartz ability. But they align perfectly with what we eventually learn about diamond powers. Yellow diamond can destroy physical forms. Blue diamond can manipulate emotions. White diamond can control minds. Pink diamond's abilities are the nurturing counterpart. She heals, she protects, she grows things, she connects. Every diamond has dominion over a fundamental aspect of gem existence, and pink diamond's domain is life itself. The show even plants clues in the way other gems react to Stephen. When Jasper first encounters him, she's confused and angry. She calls Rose a war criminal and says she respected Rose's military tactics. But the way she talks about Rose has an undercurrent of something else. She's not just angry at Rose, she's mourning Pink Diamond. And her rage at Rose is intertwined with grief for her diamond. After the reveal, you realize that Jasper's entire emotional arc is about someone who lost her diamond and has been directing that grief at the wrong target for thousands of years. Rose didn't kill Pink Diamond. Rose was Pink Diamond. And Jasper's pain comes from fighting against the very being she devoted her life to. Blue Diamond's emotional reactions to Stephen also contain hidden clues that only make sense after the reveal. When Blue meets Stephen for the first time, she cries. Her emotion-projecting powers fill the room with grief. But there's a moment where something else flickers across her face. Recognition, maybe. Or familiarity. She looks at this human child and feels something she can't explain. Later, when Stephen is put on trial at Homeworld for Rose Quartz's crimes, Blue Diamond starts to wonder if there's something wrong with the official story of Pink Diamond's shattering. She begins asking questions that nobody else is asking. On some level, Blue might be sensing that Pink Diamond's essence is still alive in this boy, even though she can't articulate what she's feeling. The trial scene in the episode The Trial, which is the 25th episode of Season 5, is a masterpiece of foreshadowing. The defending Zircon, acting as Stephen's lawyer, lays out a logical argument for why Rose Quartz couldn't have shattered Pink Diamond. She points out that Pink Diamond was surrounded by her entourage at the time of the shattering. She had her palanquin, her guards, her pearl. How did a known rebel leader walk up to a diamond surrounded by loyal gems, shatter her, and walk away? The Zircon concludes that someone with authority, someone who could dismiss the guards and approach Pink Diamond without suspicion, must have been responsible. She's essentially arguing that a diamond killed Pink Diamond. Yellow Diamond poofs the Zircon before she can finish her argument. The truth was being spoken out loud in a Homeworld courtroom, and Yellow shut it down because she couldn't handle where the logic was leading. Lion's existence makes much more sense in light of the Pink Diamond revelation. Lion is a magical pink lion that Stephen discovers in the desert. He can create portals, store objects in his mane, and access a pocket dimension that contains Rose Quartz's most treasured possessions. Later in the series, when Stephen accidentally kills Lars and then resurrects him with his tears, Lars turns pink and gains the same abilities as Lion. He can access the same pocket dimension. His hair becomes a portal. Any living thing brought back to life with the power of Pink Diamond's gem becomes connected to that pocket dimension. That power always seemed disproportionately large. For a quartz, Rose Quartz can resurrect the dead and grant them access to a personal pocket dimension. That's not a quartz level ability. That's a diamond level ability. Diamonds shape reality on a fundamental level. They create gems, they destroy worlds, they corrupt entire populations with a single attack. Of course, a diamond could bring something back from the dead. The power makes sense when you understand its source. The mural in the episode Sirius. Stephen, the 8th episode of Season 1 was one of the very first deep lore seeds the show planted. It was created before the crew had fully established the show's complete mythology. Joe Johnston, the co-executive producer, drew an initial version of the mural that Rebecca Sugar then revised because it revealed too much too early. In the official Steven Universe podcast, Johnston and Hilary Florido mentioned that fans obsessively analyzed that mural, and they said they could discuss what it actually shows after certain revelations in the show had played out. That mural was answering questions that the audience wouldn't even think to ask for another 4 seasons. There's a detail about Era 1 versus Era 2 architecture that the podcast explains. Earth's gem structures are always Era 1 style, because the colonization of Earth happened before the war. Era 1 architecture is Art Deco with Roman columns and classical design elements. Homeworld's architecture shifted to Era 2 style after the war, when resources became scarcer and gem society became more utilitarian. The difference in design philosophy between the two eras reflects the difference in gem society's values. Era 1 was expansive, ambitious, artistic in its cruelty. Era 2 was stripped down, efficient, and paranoid. The architecture tells you which version of gem civilization you're looking at before a single word of dialogue is spoken. Joe Johnston and Hilary Florido both confirmed in the podcast that much of the early gem technology and architecture was designed spontaneously by storyboard artists. They'd throw in a cool-looking pillar or an interesting piece of machinery in the background without fully knowing what it meant yet. And then, later, when the mythology solidified, those details would get retroactively incorporated into the larger story. The show was being built simultaneously from the top down with Sugar's overarching narrative and from the bottom up with artists improvising details that would later become canon. That collaborative approach is part of why Steven Universe's world building feels so rich. It wasn't just one person's vision. It was dozens of creative minds contributing details that all fed into the same evolving mythology. Pink Diamond's decision to become Rose Quartz wasn't just a disguise. Rose Quartz once told Greg that when a gem is made, it's for a reason. They burst out of the ground knowing what they're supposed to be, and that's what they are, forever. Pink Diamond said those words knowing that she herself had broken that rule. She wasn't what she was supposed to be. She was supposed to be a diamond, a ruler, a colonizer. Instead, she chose to be a rebel, a protector, and eventually a mother. That line takes on a completely different emotional register when you know the person saying it is describing her own impossible escape from a destiny she was manufactured for. Pink Diamond left behind so many loose threads. Unresolved relationships, unanswered questions, consequences that rippled across thousands of years and affected every gem she ever touched. But there are also mysteries in Steven Universe that go even deeper than Pink Diamond. Questions that the show raised and never fully answered. Lore that exists at the very edge of what was established, hovering between canon and speculation. And as we wind down this deep dive, these are the questions worth sitting with. What cracked the gem homeworld? The planet is visibly split into pieces. You can see it clearly in every shot of homeworld from space. The surface is fractured, with massive chasms running through the entire world. The end of an era. Artbook's redacted timeline suggests the diamond's emergence 20,000 years ago is connected to the damage, but the actual details are hidden behind black bars. Rebecca Sugar chose to redact that information even in a behind-the-scenes book meant for dedicated fans. Whatever happened to Homeworld, she wanted it to remain a mystery. We may never know. What is onion? This is a question that sounds like a joke, but actually has a genuinely mysterious answer. When Rebecca Sugar was asked in an interview why onion doesn't grow, doesn't age, doesn't really change at all, and why he seems to have weird, almost supernatural abilities, she said something to the effect of, well, we had to keep some things a mystery. That's not a dismissal. That's a deliberate choice to leave a question unanswered. Onion exists in the show as a small, silent, deeply unsettling child who does inexplicable things. He steals, he hoards, he creates chaos, and he never seems to face consequences that stick. His father, Yellowtail, is a fisherman who's rarely home. His mother, Vidalia, is an artist and former friend of Amethyst's. Nothing about his family explains why Onion is the way he is. He operates outside the rules that every other character in Beach City follows, and the show's creator has confirmed that this is intentional and unexplained. He's a permanent loose thread, woven into the fabric of Beach City without resolution. Some fans theorize he's connected to gem technology, or that his strangeness is a side effect of living near the Crystal Temple his entire life. Others think he's just a weird kid. Sugar seems happy to let the question float forever. Season 5 was going to explain more than we got. The reduced production order didn't just cut the Diamond Origin episode, it compressed the entire endgame of the series. Steven Universe Future, the sequel limited series, was never originally planned. It was created after the main show ended because there were still stories to tell and character arcs to complete. But because Future was produced as a separate project rather than a continuation, it had to operate under different constraints. The pacing was faster, the focus was tighter, and a lot of the lore that could have been explored in a longer Season 5 was left on the cutting room floor. The Diamond's retirement from ruling is one of the most fascinating developments in the show's final act. After Steven convinces them to change, they don't just step down, they transform themselves. Yellow Diamond, who once commanded armies and destroyed civilizations, becomes a physical healer. She uses her powers to reconstruct shattered gems, literally putting broken people back together shard by shard. Blue Diamond, who once drowned entire rooms in her grief, becomes an emotional healer. She uses her clouds, which used to force sadness onto everyone around her, to uplift gems who are feeling terrible. She inverted her own power, turning a weapon of emotional destruction into a tool for emotional support. And White Diamond, as we discussed, becomes a meditation guide, using her mind control abilities in reverse to help gems find themselves. They even set up a democratic voting system to elect new leadership. 2 Zircons were put forward as candidates for the gems to choose between. After 20,000 years of absolute monarchy, the Diamond Authority introduced democracy. It's not a smooth transition. It's messy and uncertain, but it's happening. Not every gem welcomed the change. Demantoid and Pyrope were the first rogue gems in Era 3, 2 gems who actively rejected the new system and wanted the old hierarchy back. They represent something real about any society that undergoes radical transformation. There will always be people who preferred the way things were, even if the way things were was oppressive, because at least it was familiar. The oppression gave them structure. It told them who they were. Freedom can be terrifying when you've spent your entire existence being told what to be. Eyeball and Aquamarine are another pair who couldn't cope. They were cast off from Homeworld not because they committed crimes, but because they were unable to adapt to the new society. Their mutual hatred of Steven, the being they blamed for destroying the world they understood, became the only thing that connected them. They bonded over resentment, because they had nothing else left. Steven himself doesn't end the show in a place of triumph. Steven Universe Future ends with him having a complete emotional breakdown. The accumulated trauma of his entire life, the battles, the revelations, the weight of being half diamond and half human and responsible for healing a civilization, it all catches up to him at once. His body can't contain it anymore. He transforms into a massive corrupted monster form, a kaiju-sized creature of pure unprocessed pain. The same corruption that afflicted thousands of gems now afflicts the boy who spent years trying to cure it. Steven Universe Future is a remarkable piece of television because it's an entire series dedicated to the aftermath of saving the world. Most stories end when the hero wins. Future asks what happens when the hero wins and then has to live with everything that winning cost them. Steven spends the series trying to be helpful. He builds Little Homeworld, a community on Earth where gems and humans live together. He helps former enemies adjust to Era 3. He mentors young gems finding their new identities. He does everything right, and he's falling apart. The signs are there from the first episode. Steven's powers start glitching. He turns pink when he's angry. His shield becomes unstable. He can't control his strength. These aren't power surges. They're stress responses. His gem is reacting to his emotional state, and his emotional state is a wreck. He's been a child soldier, essentially. He fought in a war. He watched people he loved get hurt. He learned that his mother was a liar, and that his entire family history was built on deception. He died and came back. He was put on trial. He was imprisoned. He fused with a corrupted gem. He carried the weight of an entire civilization's reformation on his shoulders. And nobody thought to ask him if he was okay. The show handles Steven's declining mental health with a care that's unusual for any medium, let alone animation aimed at young audiences. It doesn't romanticize his suffering. It doesn't treat his breakdown as a dramatic spectacle. It treats it as what it is. A young person who has been carrying too much for too long, finally reaching the point where their body and mind can't continue. The corruption that takes him isn't caused by a weapon. It's caused by years of suppressed trauma erupting all at once. There's a moment in the episode Growing Pains, which is the 9th episode of Steven Universe Future, where Steven visits a doctor and learns that his body has been under so much physical stress that it's essentially been in constant fight or flight mode. The doctor lists the injuries and trauma responses his body has experienced, and the list is staggering. Steven has been living in a state of chronic crisis for years, and his body has been keeping score even when his mind tried to push through. When Steven finally corrupts, his form is massive. He's a pink horned creature towering over Beach City, screaming and thrashing without any apparent consciousness. The crystal gems try to fight him and can't. He's too powerful. Even the diamonds can't contain him. Nothing works. Force doesn't work. Strategy doesn't work. Power doesn't work. His friends and family don't fight him. They surround him. Every person who has ever loved Steven, the crystal gems, his father, Greg, Connie, the diamonds, the citizens of Beach City, they all gather around this enormous corrupted form and they hold on. They don't try to fix him with magic or powers. They just love him. They let him feel what he's feeling without trying to make it stop. And slowly, gradually, he comes back. Connie reaches him with a kiss. He returns to his human form and finally, for the first time in the entire series, he breaks down crying. He lets it all out. Years of held-in emotions pouring out of him in a single moment of surrender. The show gives Steven's recovery real time and real weight. He doesn't just snap back to normal after the corruption. He doesn't have a single cathartic moment and then return to being a hero. He spends months healing. He sees a therapist. He processes what happened to him. He learns that his compulsive need to help everyone was actually a way of avoiding his own pain. By making himself indispensable to others, he never had to stop and face what was happening inside himself. The helper was the one who needed help, and accepting help was the hardest thing he'd ever done. The conversation he has with his therapist isn't shown directly, but the results are. Steven becomes calmer, more honest about his feelings, less desperate to fix everything around him. He starts saying no. He starts asking for things instead of always giving. He learns that he doesn't have to earn love by being useful, that he's loved for who he is, not for what he does. And then he makes a choice that the show treats as genuinely heroic. He leaves Beach City. He gets in his car and drives away to see the world, not to save it, not to heal it, just to see it, to be a person, to exist without a mission for the first time in his life. The final episode of Steven Universe Future is called The Future. In it, Steven says goodbye to everyone. He visits the crystal gems, his father, Connie, the diamonds, the citizens of Beach City. Each goodbye is specific and personal. He's not running away. He's moving forward. There's a difference. Running away means leaving because you can't handle what's behind you. Moving forward means leaving because you're ready for what's ahead of you. Stephen has processed enough of his pain to know that staying in Beach City, surrounded by the people and places that defined his trauma, would keep him anchored to the version of himself that was always saving the world. He needs to find out who he is when the world doesn't need saving. Connie and Stephen are together now, officially a couple, but they're choosing a relationship built on growth rather than proximity. She's going to college. He's going to explore. They'll find their way back to each other, but first they both need to find themselves separately. That's a mature, honest depiction of young love that most shows aimed at any age group don't have the courage to attempt. Before we wind down, there are a few more pieces of obscure lore worth sitting with. These are the quiet details, the ones that don't get discussed in theory videos or lore breakdowns. But that adds so much texture to the world of Steven Universe when you know they're there. Little Homeworld is the community that Steven builds on Earth for Gems, who want to live alongside humans after Era 3 begins. It is located near Beach City, and it's where many of the formerly corrupted gems settle after being healed. The architecture is a blend of gem and human design. Gems learn human skills like cooking and music. Humans learn about gem culture. It's a genuinely utopian vision, a place where two species that were at war for thousands of years learn to coexist. But Little Homeworld also contains a subtle piece of world building that speaks to how difficult that coexistence really is. The gems living in Little Homeworld are immortal beings adjusting to a world that runs on mortal time. They don't need to eat, but they learn to cook because humans enjoy sharing meals. They don't need to sleep, but they learn about rest because their human neighbors have rhythms that include downtime. They've never experienced seasons or weather or aging. Everything about human life is alien to them, and everything about gem life is alien to the humans. Little Homeworld works not because the differences are erased, but because both sides choose to be curious about each other rather than afraid. That's a small detail, but it's the foundation of the show's entire message about coexistence. Peridot's character journey is one of the most complete arcs in the series, and it contains lore details that add depth to gem biology. Peridot is an Era 2 gem, manufactured after the war when Homeworld's resources were depleted. Era 2 gems came out weaker. They lacked standard gem abilities like shapeshifting. Peridot had to use mechanical limb enhancers, essentially robotic arms and legs, to compensate for what her body couldn't do naturally. When those enhancers were destroyed on Earth, she was devastated. She felt naked, useless, smaller than she was supposed to be. But over time, Peridot discovers she does have a power. She's ferrokinetic. She can control metal with her mind. It's a small ability compared to what other gems can do, but it's hers. She didn't get it from her manufacturing. She discovered it through experience. In a system that tells every gem what they are from the moment they emerge, Peridot found something in herself that wasn't part of the blueprint. That discovery is one of the show's most quietly powerful moments. You can be made for one purpose and still find something inside yourself that nobody planned for. Peridot's original mission was to check on the cluster's progress. She was sent to Earth as a technician, nothing more. She wasn't a soldier or a fighter or a leader. She was a maintenance worker doing a routine inspection on a doomsday weapon. When the crystal gems captured her, and she eventually switched sides, it wasn't because of some dramatic revelation about the morality of Homeworld's empire. It was because she called Yellow Diamond on a direct communication line, told her Earth was worth preserving, and Yellow Diamond essentially told her to shut up and do her job. That moment of being dismissed, of being told her observations and opinions didn't matter, was what pushed Peridot to rebel. She called Yellow Diamond a clod, the gem equivalent of the worst insult imaginable, and sided with the people who actually listened to her. The rebellion didn't win Peridot over with ideology. They won her over by treating her like her thoughts mattered. The music of Steven Universe is itself a piece of lore that deserves recognition. The show's soundtrack was composed primarily by Ivy Tran and Steven Valema, a duo known as Ivy and Surashu, along with additional music by Jeff Liu and Rebecca Sugar herself. Sugar wrote many of the show's songs personally, and several of them contain lore details hidden in their lyrics. The song Love Like You, which plays over the end credits across multiple seasons, was written from the perspective of a character who doesn't understand human love and is slowly learning what it means to be loved by someone they feel unworthy of. Sugar has confirmed that the perspective shifts throughout the song's lifetime, starting as a more general voice and eventually becoming deeply personal. The musical episode Mr. Greg, which is the 8th episode of Season 3, is built entirely around Pearl's unresolved feelings about Rose Quartz choosing Greg over her. The song It's Over isn't. It is Pearl processing grief, jealousy, and loss through song, standing on a balcony overlooking Empire City. After the Pink Diamond reveal, the lyrics take on new dimensions. Pearl wasn't just in love with Rose, she was in love with Pink Diamond. She served Pink Diamond. She kept Pink Diamond secret. She watched Pink Diamond fall in love with a human and choose that human over her, the gem who had sacrificed everything. And she could never tell anyone why it hurt so much, because talking about her relationship with Rose would mean talking about who Rose really was. The 4-pointed diamond insignia that appears throughout the show is another piece of visual lore. In Era 1, the insignia had 4 diamonds arranged in a diamond shape, representing all 4 members of the Great Diamond Authority, with white at the top, yellow and blue on the sides, and pink at the bottom. After Pink Diamond's supposed shattering, the insignia was modified. The pink diamond was removed, leaving only 3. You can see the difference between old and new insignias throughout the show. Era 1 structures on Earth have the 4-diamond logo. Homeworld ships and modern technology use the 3-diamond version. The change is subtle, but once you notice it, you see it everywhere. Every 3-diamond symbol is a reminder that Homeworld erased Pink Diamond from their identity. They didn't just mourn her, they deleted her. There's also a detail about gem architecture that's easy to miss. The Sky Arena, which first appears in the episode Sworn to the Sword, the 9th episode of Season 2, contains one of the earliest visible 4-diamond insignias with the pink section broken apart. Fans spotted this and speculated that there was a 4th diamond whose symbol had been damaged or removed. At the time, only yellow diamond had been confirmed to exist. The broken pink section in the Sky Arena insignia was one of the first concrete clues that Pink Diamond existed at all and that something had happened to her. The show was planting answers in the background art years before the questions were even asked. The Galaxy Warp connects to one last piece of lore worth mentioning. When Homeworld abandoned Earth, they didn't just leave behind kindergartens and battlefields. They left behind temples, arenas, communication hubs, and structures scattered across the planet. The Crystal Gems spend the early seasons of the show visiting these abandoned locations, fighting corrupted gems that have nested in the ruins. Each location is a piece of gem history. The Lunar Sea Spire was once a cultural monument. The Sky Arena was where gem soldiers trained and where Pearl learned to sword fight. The communication hub was a relay station for interplanetary messages. These aren't just adventure locations. They're archaeological sites, ruins of a civilization that left in a hurry and never came back to clean up. That's the real obscure lore of Steven Universe. Not just the facts about kindergartens and diamonds and forced fusions, though those are fascinating. The real deep cut is the philosophy underneath all of it. This is a show where the most powerful weapon in the universe is a flash of light that breaks your mind, and the cure for it is 4 people who love each other standing together. Where the most dangerous villain is a perfectionist who can't accept her own flaws. Where the greatest hero is a boy who has to learn that helping everyone else doesn't count as helping yourself. The Gem War lasted thousands of years and killed or corrupted most of the gems on Earth. The solution wasn't a bigger weapon or a smarter strategy. It was a teenager telling the most powerful being in the universe that it's okay to not be perfect. The cluster, a bomb made of millions of tortured souls, was defused not by drilling or explosions, but by Steven falling asleep and talking to the shards until they comforted each other. Spinel stood alone for 6,000 years because someone she loved didn't have the courage to tell her the truth And the resolution wasn't revenge, but the painful, imperfect process of starting over with new people. Every piece of lore in this show loops back to the same idea, that the opposite of destruction isn't power, it's empathy. That the hardest battles aren't fought with swords, but with honesty. That growing and changing is the most radical thing a being can do in a universe designed to keep everyone static. And maybe that's the most obscure piece of lore in the whole show. Not a hidden detail or a redacted timeline or a scrapped episode, but the quiet, persistent, almost stubborn argument that runs through every single storyline from the first episode to the last. That people can change, that even diamonds can learn to be something entirely other than what they were made to be. That even a gem who stood perfectly still for 6,000 years can eventually start moving again. That's all for tonight. If you made it this far, genuinely, thank you for staying with us. If you drifted off somewhere around the kindergartens or the corrupting light, that's perfectly fine too. Either way, we're glad you were here. Subscribe if you want more deep dives like this one. And wherever you are right now, whether you're falling asleep or just letting this play in the background, I hope something in here gave you a new way to think about a show that gave so many of us something to care about. Sleep well. And if you're just waking up and this is still playing in the background, good morning. Either way, we appreciate you being here. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for listening.